Imagine one of Hollywood's most recognizable actors arriving for what seems like an ordinary promotional interview, only to discover the conversation has turned into something far more confrontational. What begins as a routine appearance quickly transforms into a tense exchange where courtesy collides with provocation, and a respected performer reaches a breaking point after facing repeated personal criticism. Robert Downey Jr. appeared on The View to talk about his newest project. The audience welcomed him enthusiastically as he stepped onto the stage wearing his familiar confident smile. At first, everything seemed perfectly normal, but it didn't take long for the atmosphere to shift. Behar opened with a question that carried an unexpected tone. "So, Robert," she said, "you've built a career portraying heroes. Iron Man, Sherlock Holmes, and so many other characters audiences admire. But doesn't that strike you as a little contradictory?" Robert looked puzzled, his smile fading slightly. "Contradictory? I'm not sure what you mean. Are you referring to the roles I've played or something else entirely?" Joy leaned closer, keeping her attention fixed on him. "I think you understand exactly where I'm going. You portray these noble, honorable figures on screen, but what about your own life? Let's talk about your past instead." The mood in the studio changed instantly. Robert straightened in his chair, becoming noticeably more reserved. "My past," he replied calmly. "I've never hidden my struggles or my recovery. I've spoken openly about those experiences for years. I believe we were here to discuss my latest film." Joy continued without hesitation. "Yes, your struggles. The very public ones that somehow became an incredible redemption story. But how can anyone be certain that this comeback isn't simply another performance? How do we know you're really different from the man people saw 2 decades ago?" Robert leaned back, no longer smiling. His expression reflected restraint rather than frustration. "Joy, I'll assume you're asking because you're interested in honesty, not because you're trying to create a dramatic television moment. But let me make something perfectly clear. My recovery, my family, and the work I've done to improve my life are not acts. They're the most genuine parts of who I am." Joy answered with a slight grin. "But isn't that exactly what someone would say if they wanted people to believe the story? You've built an entire second chapter of your career around redemption. Going from troubled actor to admired role model is a very appealing narrative." Around the table, the atmosphere became increasingly uncomfortable. Some of the other hosts exchanged uncertain glances, yet the questioning continued. "And while we're at it," Joy added, "let's discuss politics. You play patriotic characters, but you rarely take strong public positions on political issues. Is that intentional? Are you trying to avoid upsetting your audience?" Robert took a slow breath before responding. "I think you're mixing together several unrelated subjects. Honestly, I'm beginning to wonder what this interview is really supposed to accomplish. Are we here to talk about my work, or is the goal simply to manufacture controversy?" He paused before continuing. "If it's the second option, then I think viewers deserve to recognize that." For the first time, Joy seemed caught slightly off guard. "I don't have any agenda," she replied. "I'm asking questions that many people would want answered. You're a public figure who's earned tremendous success portraying heroes. Isn't it fair to ask whether the person behind those roles lives up to that image?" "Fair," Robert repeated, his voice becoming noticeably firmer. "Let me ask you something. When you come to work and decide to focus on someone's worst moments instead of the reason they're sitting here today, do you consider that fair? Do you think turning someone's lowest chapters into television entertainment is the right way to treat a guest?" Joy immediately defended herself. "I'm not attacking you, I'm holding you accountable." "Accountable for what?" Robert responded. "For overcoming addiction, for rebuilding my life, for admitting where I failed and working every day to become a better person." His patience was beginning to wear thin. "You keep talking about performance. If we're discussing performances, let's talk about this one. You're presenting yourself as an objective interviewer, but it feels more like you're trying to embarrass a guest in front of a live audience." Joy interrupted. "I've been doing this for years. I don't need a Hollywood actor telling me how interviews should be conducted." Robert answered without hesitation. "Then maybe it's time to remember what an interview actually is. Because this doesn't feel like one. It feels like a personal attack, and those are two very different things. I believe the audience can recognize that distinction." Joy's voice grew sharper. "I'm asking reasonable questions about your character and your authenticity. People deserve to know who they're admiring." Robert let out a short laugh, though there was no amusement behind it. "The public already knows plenty about me. They've watched me make mistakes, face consequences, recover, and rebuild my life. They've seen me as a father, a husband, and someone committed to showing up, working hard, and moving forward. What they're watching now isn't a revelation about me. It's an interview that seems far more interested in revisiting the past than having an honest conversation. Joy shook her head. That's not what this is about, she insisted, though her words sounded less certain than before. Then what is it about? Robert replied. Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like I was invited here under one pretense, only to be confronted with personal accusations dressed up as an interview. And honestly, Joy, that reflects far more on you than it does on me. The studio became completely silent, broken only by the quiet sound of the production equipment. Joy tried to answer, but hesitated. Before she could regain her footing, Robert leaned forward, his expression calm but intense. You want to know who the real Robert Downey Jr. is? He said. I'm someone who made serious mistakes, accepted responsibility for them, and spent years working to become a better person. I'm someone who believes people deserve another chance because I've lived through one myself. And right now, I'm watching a television host forget what it means to welcome a guest because creating a viral clip seems more important than showing basic respect. The room grew even more uncomfortable as his words settled in. Joy's face flushed, but instead of backing away, she became even more defensive. Don't lecture me about respect, she shot back. I've been doing this job for decades. I know how to ask difficult questions. If you can't handle real journalism, maybe you should stay with movie scripts instead. Robert raised an eyebrow, a restrained smile appearing briefly. Real journalism, he repeated. Is that honestly what you'd call this? I've spoken with experienced journalists on respected news programs, and they manage to ask challenging questions without relying on personal attacks or trying to trap their guests. This isn't an attack, Joy insisted, her voice growing sharper. It's accountability. You can't expect to walk in here smiling and charming everyone while avoiding legitimate questions about your history and your political views. My political views, Robert said with a laugh, this time sounding genuinely surprised. Since you've brought politics into this, let's talk about it. You've spent the last several minutes trying to define someone by mistakes they made decades ago. Mistakes I've never tried to hide. Is that really the approach? Tear people down instead of trying to understand them. One of the other hosts attempted to calm the discussion. Maybe we should slow things down. But Joy interrupted before the sentence was finished. No, this matters. She turned back toward Robert. You've made a fortune playing characters who represent courage, justice, and patriotism. But when major issues affect the country, where are you? Why don't people hear your voice? Robert's expression became noticeably more serious. Where's my voice? He repeated. I contribute to charitable causes. I support organizations that help veterans. I work with environmental initiatives. I simply don't believe every public appearance needs to become a political debate. He paused before continuing. But since you asked, let me ask you something. What cause are you advancing by putting your own guests on the defensive? What truth are you uncovering by using someone's recovery as ammunition during an interview? I'm telling the public what they deserve to know. Joy answered immediately. People see you as a completely changed man, a devoted husband and father. They deserve to know whether that's genuine or just another carefully crafted Hollywood image. Robert's voice dropped, becoming calm enough that it drew even more attention. A Hollywood image. He looked directly at her before speaking again. My son is probably watching this at home with my wife. My family isn't a publicity campaign. My sobriety isn't a marketing strategy. The effort I put into becoming a better person every single day is real. He paused for a moment. But do you know what doesn't feel real? An interview where attacking the guest is presented as serving the audience. So now I'm the villain because I ask difficult questions, Joy replied. You come onto this show to promote your latest movie and sell tickets, but you don't want to answer questions about your past or where you stand on important issues. That's not how this works. Robert shifted forward in his chair, his calm demeanor finally giving way to visible frustration. You want a difficult question, Joy, he said. Here's one. How do you look in the mirror each morning knowing your job has become tearing down people who have worked hard to rebuild their lives? How do you convince yourself it's acceptable to treat recovery like a joke and personal growth like something that deserves suspicion? The studio became completely silent. Even the crew behind the camera seemed frozen. Joy hesitated before answering. I don't owe you an explanation. I've spent decades asking challenging questions, and I'm not going to stop because one actor doesn't like being challenged. Challenged for what? Robert fired back, his voice echoing across the set. For being human? For making mistakes, taking responsibility, and learning from them. For building a career and a family while being honest about my past. If that's your definition of accountability, then what would you call what's happening here? Because from my perspective, it looks a lot more like intimidation than journalism. Joy struck the desk with her hand. I'm not intimidating anyone. I'm asking the questions that matter. No, Robert answered immediately. You're not asking questions anymore. You're making accusations. You're not searching for facts. You're creating confrontation. And the saddest part is that you're so determined to bring someone down that you've forgotten what real journalism is supposed to look like. One of the other hosts tried to redirect the discussion. Maybe we should move the conversation in another direction. Joy cut in before anyone else could speak. Don't lecture me about journalism, Robert. I've been questioning powerful people since long before your legal troubles made headlines. The remark landed heavily across the studio. Robert became completely still, his expression changing as he answered in a calm, controlled voice. There it is, he said quietly. That's the real approach. When the argument isn't working, you go straight for someone's lowest point. You take the worst chapter of their life and use it as ammunition because you don't have anything stronger to stand on. Joy quickly responded. I was only stating the facts. No, Robert interrupted. You were being deliberately hurtful. He paused before continuing. I've spent more than 15 years rebuilding my life. I've worked to become a better father, a better husband, and a better person. But none of that seems to matter to you because you'd rather keep pointing at the person I used to be instead of recognizing the person I've worked to become. Joy refused to back down. What about the people who never got the opportunities you had? What about those who didn't have wealth, connections, or expensive lawyers helping them? Robert nodded thoughtfully before answering. You're right about one thing. I was fortunate. I had support that many people never receive. I understand that, and his voice became quieter. And because I understand it, I spend my time trying to help others facing the same struggles I once faced. I support rehabilitation efforts. I contribute to programs that help people in recovery. I try to give others opportunities that can change their lives. He looked directly at her. But those parts of the story don't fit the narrative you're trying to create, do they? They don't help turn this into the dramatic moment you're looking for. Joy's response came much more softly. That's not what I'm trying to do. Then what are you trying to accomplish? Robert asked. I came here to talk about a film, connect with your audience, and have a conversation. Instead, nearly every minute has been spent revisiting my past and questioning whether I've changed. Why? What's the goal? Is it simply to embarrass someone on live television? Joy hesitated before replying. I'm trying to get honest answers from someone who spent years shaping a public image. Robert leaned closer. My public image has never been a secret, he said. People know I struggled with addiction. They know I made serious mistakes. They also know I've spent years trying to repair the damage and become a better man. That's not image management. That's honesty. He continued without taking his eyes off her. But your public image is built around asking tough questions. Right now, though it doesn't look like you're searching for truth, it looks like you're searching for conflict. The room fell silent once again. Joy's expression shifted from disbelief to frustration before she finally spoke. That's enough. I don't have to sit here and be insulted by someone who thinks fame puts them beyond criticism. Robert gave a brief humorless laugh. Beyond criticism. I've faced criticism from critics, journalists, politicians, and the public throughout my career. The difference is that many of them were discussing something meaningful. This isn't constructive criticism. This feels like a personal attack, and there's a very clear difference between the two. My only agenda, Joy replied, her voice rising, is making sure celebrities don't come onto this show expecting to smile through difficult questions without giving real answers. Real questions, Robert said as he rose from his chair, appearing ready to leave. Let me show you what a real question sounds like. A real question would be, how did overcoming addiction influence the way you approach playing heroic characters? Another real question would be, what do you hope people learn from your journey of recovery? Those are thoughtful questions. Those are the kinds of conversations that actually teach people something. What we've seen here isn't journalism, Robert said. It's an attempt to damage someone's reputation while calling it an interview. One of the co-hosts tried once again to calm the situation. Robert, Joy, maybe we should. Before the sentence could finish, Joy interrupted. Don't tell me how to do my job. I've spent years asking difficult questions, and I'm not about to stop because one successful actor doesn't enjoy being challenged. Robert turned toward her, meeting her gaze without hesitation. Privilege, he replied. Since you brought it up, let's talk about privilege. Let's talk about the privilege of having a national platform and using it to tear into the very guests you've invited. Let's talk about the privilege of hiding behind the title of journalism while pursuing something that feels far more personal. He paused briefly. Because that's what this looks like. This isn't really about my past, my career, or my opinions. It feels like it's about proving a point by putting someone else down in front of millions of viewers. Joy shook her head. How dare you? How dare I what? Robert answered immediately. How dare I speak up when I think someone is crossing a line? How dare I refuse to let the hardest period of my life become entertainment? How dare I expect a little respect from someone who calls themselves a professional? His tone remained steady. I've spent enough years working on myself to recognize unhealthy behavior. And honestly, some of what I'm seeing here raises those same concerns. The remark visibly unsettled Joy. You don't know anything about me, she replied, struggling to stay composed. I know what I'm watching, Robert answered calmly. I'm watching someone who seems so determined to create a memorable television moment that she's willing to sacrifice fairness in the process. I'm watching a host forget that the people sitting across from her are human beings, not simply material for the next headline. Joy defended herself. I treat every guest exactly the same. Everyone gets difficult questions. Robert shook his head. No, they don't. I've watched this program before. I've seen guests receive friendly conversations while others face a completely different approach. This isn't simply about asking hard questions. It feels like you've already decided who deserves the benefit of the doubt before the interview even begins. Joy folded her arms. I don't owe you, or anyone else, an explanation for how I conduct my interviews. Robert smiled slightly, though there was little warmth in it. Maybe not to me, he replied, but I do think you owe your audience one. They deserve to know why someone is invited to discuss their work, only for the conversation to become centered almost entirely on personal attacks. They deserve to know why that's being presented as journalism. Another co-host tried to redirect the discussion. Maybe we can talk about Robert's new project instead. Joy ignored the suggestion. You want to know why? Because I'm tired of celebrities believing they can control every interview. I'm tired of actors expecting easy questions while making millions portraying heroes they couldn't possibly be in real life. The room fell quiet. Robert slowly nodded. Thank you, he said softly. I think you've finally answered the real question, he continued. So this was never really about accountability. It wasn't about informing the audience or uncovering the truth. It was about frustration with people in my profession. You decided long before I walked onto this set what kind of interview you wanted this to be, and everything since then has followed that script. Joy quickly objected. That's not true, isn't it? Robert asked. Think about every question you've asked today. Each one was framed to paint me in the worst possible light. Every answer I gave was immediately reinterpreted as something negative. I spoke honestly about the most difficult period of my life, and instead of acknowledging that honesty, you used it against me. He paused before finishing his thought. If that isn't personal, then what exactly would you call it? Joy answered firmly. I call it accountability. Joy repeated the word, accountability, but this time it no longer carried the same confidence. Robert slowly shook his head. No, Joy. That's not accountability. Accountability means asking someone about their actions and giving them a fair opportunity to respond. It means challenging those answers with evidence and facts, not assumptions or accusations. He continued in a calm but firm voice. What happened here was an attempt to embarrass me because you believed it would make compelling television. And maybe it will. Maybe people will watch, debate it, and share clips everywhere. Maybe that will be considered a success. The room remained silent. Robert spoke again, his voice growing more resolute. But I hope viewers take away something different. I hope they recognize the difference between fair criticism and a personal attack. I hope they understand that holding someone accountable doesn't require humiliating them. And I hope they remember that every person, whether they're famous or not, whether they've made mistakes or not, deserves to be treated with basic respect. He rose from his seat, making it clear the conversation was over. Jai, I came here to discuss a project that means a great deal to me and to spend time with an audience that has supported my work for years. Instead, I've spent this interview defending my recovery, my family, and my character against accusations that have nothing to do with why I was invited. He looked around the studio. That isn't journalism. It isn't accountability. And it certainly isn't the kind of conversation I expected. Joy made one last attempt to stop him. You can't just leave because you don't like the questions. Robert paused before stepping away. These weren't questions, he replied. They were personal attacks. And yes, I absolutely can choose to walk away from that. And he added quietly, one of the most valuable lessons I've learned over the years is that I don't have to accept unhealthy treatment from anyone, regardless of who they are or how large their platform may be. He briefly turned toward the audience. To everyone who's supported me over the years, thank you. Thank you for believing that people are capable of changing, growing, and becoming better than they once were. And never forget that respect is something everyone deserves. Robert calmly removed his microphone, signaling that he was finished. Joy called after him. This proves my point. You couldn't handle real scrutiny, so you're walking away. Robert stopped for one final response. Joy, if you believe what happened here today was genuine scrutiny, then I think we have very different definitions of that word. Real scrutiny is built on facts, evidence, and fair questions. What happened here relied on personal accusations while being presented as journalism. Those are two completely different things. With that, Robert turned and walked away from the set, leaving behind an unusually quiet studio as everyone tried to process the tense exchange that had just unfolded. The cameras lingered for a few moments before the broadcast moved on, while the remaining hosts worked to regain control of the discussion. What had begun as a routine promotional interview had ended as a tense and uncomfortable confrontation, with the focus shifting far away from the project that had originally brought the guests to the show.